Welcome to the Sports Spectrum Podcast, where faith and sports collide. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Welcome, everyone, to the podcast. My name is Jason Romano. This is Sports Spectrum, episode number 99 of the Sports Spectrum Podcast. So great to have you joining us here on the program today, wherever you're listening, whether it's on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, your mobile phone device with that podcast app. Click that download and subscribe button and definitely check us out there. Or you can go to our YouTube page and subscribe there. Just look for Sports Spectrum, and every single podcast we produce is on our YouTube channel, as well as sportspectrum.com, where you can become a member for just $36 and partner with us and help be a part of all of the great content that we're producing here at Sports Spectrum, both on the website, with the podcast, and all of our special projects as well. Everything can be found at sportspectrum.com. Today's guest, Daniel Jeremiah, joins us here on the podcast. And Daniel, of course, with the NFL Network, with NFL.com, and the host of Move the Sticks podcast, as well as all the different content that he produces with the NFL.com, getting ready for the draft. And you can see him April 26th, 8 o'clock Eastern on the NFL Network. The NFL Draft starts, and Daniel will be on the big boy set, as he says. Gets to be at the big table. Coverage of the NFL Draft live from Dallas at Jerry's World, AT&T Stadium, home of the Dallas Cowboys. And it begins on the NFL Network, 8 p.m. Eastern, Thursday, April 26th. And Daniel joins us here on the podcast. And we talk about a lot of different things with him. Obviously, his work with the NFL and the content producing and preparing for the NFL Draft. But Daniel was a scout for 3 different teams in the NFL with the Ravens, the Browns, and the Eagles. And he played college football as well at Appalachian State. So we talk about his journey from playing football to covering it to scouting it. But we also talk about his faith. His dad is David Jeremiah, a very well-known pastor out in California. And David is in many ways a public figure as a pastor. And his son Daniel now is a very well-known public figure covering the NFL. And this podcast is a lot of fun because we talk with Daniel about the journey, about his faith, about growing up as a PK, a pastor's kid, and just listen to the story of how God sort of ordained him into this sports/NFL world and then into the NFL media side of things. First with ESPN when he was much younger, and now with the NFL Network. Really, really enjoyed talking to Daniel. He and I met back in 2009 when I was working at ESPN, and he was just getting into this media world after his scouting career, and we brought him into ESPN, and he did some great work with us working on the show First Take before leaving to go back to the NFL Network after he finished his stint with the Eagles. And just a great guy, loves the Lord, and really, really good at what he does. One of my favorite analysts, one of my favorite personalities on television, and he's a guy you want to watch if you love the NFL. You want to watch Daniel Jeremiah's coverage on the NFL Draft. So without further ado, here he is. Let's get right to it. NFL Network, NFL.com. He is Daniel Jeremiah. You follow these prospects. So let's start with the draft really quick and work. You work on the draft really year round, and we're a few weeks away now as we tape this podcast. Tell us the type of preparation that you're doing. It's got to be insanity, I got to guess right now. I'm just trying to figure out everything. But tell us the type of prep you're doing right now.
Yeah, it's a mad scramble, but I love it. It's my favorite thing I get to do. My wife kind of knows too. It's like a 6-week sprint from when we start path to the draft, which is always right around free agency. This year was just right after free agency, which is our hour daily show on NFL Network. Once that hits, I mean, your day is spoken for from when you wake up to when you go to bed. You're just trying to cram in as many players as you can study and watch on tape, and then also go through all the other duties. So I try and get as much done as I can before that 6-week call. But the challenge is, hey, it's NFL Network. So during the fall, we're covering the NFL. We're covering NFL games, doing it for TV shows as well as our podcast that we have here. It usually for me, like I watch 50 or so of the top players over the summer and try and get an initial feel for those guys. And then once we get into the fall, I'll go out to some games early in the fall. But then it really cranks up for me. Usually like Thanksgiving comes, it's it's like that's the point where I go, okay, let's change gears. Okay, let's back off a little bit of NFL work, and now I got to start really cranking up the college work. And that's when I'll start watching players. And when it's all said and done, when we get to the draft, that's when usually I'll have about 400, right around 400 players that I'll have watched, studied, and taken notes on, and written up. So it's a long journey, but we're almost to the finish line, and that's when you kind of pick your head up and you get excited because the event itself is there's nothing like it.
Yeah, having worked, for so many years with guys like Mel Kiper and Todd McShay, and even when you and I kind of worked together a little bit back in 2009, 2010 on ESPN2, it was just, I was so, especially working with Mel and Todd and watching the kind of work, but also the kind of like Rain Man-ish type stuff that was coming out of their brain. And I know I have a little bit of that too in some sports, but this is 400 players that you just described, Daniel. Is there a moment when you're literally just kind of just rambling off names and places, just you don't even realize where that comes from? It's just stored somewhere in the back of your brain.
Yeah, no. And the funny thing is, my wife will just kind of roll her eyes at me because I could be in my office late at night, watching somebody. I'll call her in to show her a play she does not care about, yet I continually do it. So I'll bring her in there and she'll go, "Okay, great, that's awesome." And then also, you could be sitting there just having a conversation, and I'll just throw in, "Hey, can you believe this guy? Did this, and the other." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And I don't know. It just kind of pops out of your head there about a particular player, or something you may have learned about them that day.
That's so funny. What's the toughest part about studying the draft, like analyzing these players? It could be something even away from the job itself, but what's the toughest part?
There's a couple things that, having scouted for a team and then done this job in the media. I actually think it's harder on the media side than the team side, and I know some of my buddies in the league will roll their eyes at this, but I really do think it is harder because we don't have all of the information they have afforded to them in terms of the background on these players. So you're watching the tape and you're getting a feel for them there, and you're talking to some people around the player and get as much information as you can. But you don't have an army. You don't have a staff of scouts like you would for a team to be able to really kind of spread yourself around and get all the information. And so when you don't know the person, it's difficult to scout the player. So that's just kind of the challenge on the media side. And then I always give them a hard time and say, look, you guys only have to go on record with what you thought about 7 to 10 players every year. Yeah. It's just the guys you picked. We don't know what you thought of the other, 200 plus guys that got picked. On the media side, we got to give our opinion on every single player. So trust me, there's more than a few folks out there that are on the hunt to find those ones where you royally screwed up. And that's what I think it's funny. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
But they're paying attention. That's a good thing. But I always give them a hard time. So, come on, you guys only have to go on record with 7 to 10 guys. You got it easy.
Absolutely. Now, is there a story of someone who you put, say, a lot of confidence in, and he just didn't turn out to be what you thought? Like, that's your guy. You get made fun of all the time. Like, you love this dude, and he just didn't pan out. And obviously, as fellow believers, and we'll talk about your faith in a minute, we're not critiquing. My friend Jerry Madelon always says we're not critiquing the person, we're critiquing the performance.
Yes.
Which I love that. But for you, is there a guy that you just were like, man, I thought that he was going to be this good, and it just didn't pan out?
Oh, trust me, there's a long list. I mean, this is in scouting. If you're batting 50%, you're ahead of the curve. You're doing a great job. But yeah. I think one of the important things is an evaluator, and I think this is applicable to life as well. You go back through and you study where you were right and where you were wrong. I actually do a little thing on our podcast where we call it hits and misses, where I'll go back and I'll read a report and I won't say the name of the player, and then I'll see if the folks at home can figure out who it was. And either I got him right or really, really wrong. And so a guy like Kevin White, who I thought was just going to be a stud, a wide receiver come out of West Virginia, that went to the Bears there, I think, in the top 5. And I thought he was going to be awesome. Now he's had some injuries, but I compared him to Julio Jones coming out, and that is even when he's been on the field, that has not been the case. So that's definitely one. Another one that was picked up high, Greg Robinson from Auburn. Yeah. An offensive lineman who's, he's now on his second or third team and just did not work out with the Rams. He was ultra athletic, was physical, but he'd played in, a spread offense, and there was some some work to do for him to adjust to the next level. I thought he would be able to do it easily. It did not happen. But the good news is, like, I go back through, I keep a sequence list. So how I rate these players, I keep it in an Excel sheet. And so I'll go back, over that sheet 2 to 3 years later, and it's so easy now. I mean, I just go back through there and you use the highlight function and just kind of scroll down through the list and put the red highlight and missed this one, missed this one.
Yeah.
And so I'll do little projects and say, okay, in the off season, it's great. I'm going to look at offensive linemen that I've gotten right and I've gotten wrong, and I'm going to try and see if there's a common thread between the guys that I missed on. And you'd be amazed at every time you can find stuff. So like for offensive line, for example, I remember going back and looking at that and saying, okay, when I've overvalued athleticism, I've undervalued toughness and intelligence at the offensive line position. And intelligence, I mean like football instincts, just natural awareness on the field. When I've undervalued that and overvalued athleticism, I get in trouble. So you try and make a note on that when you go forward to make sure you're on the lookout for that stuff. So I think the guys that are afraid to not only admit your mistakes, but go back and study them, I think you're missing a great opportunity.
Fans love the mock drafts too. I mean, I love them.
You
Who
think?
doesn't? Every time I go back and read one, and I read like 1,000 of them as a Dallas Cowboys fan, I'm like, all right, who they taking? And it's like 17 different players, and I'm starting to kind of get sold on one player or one position or whatever. But I do love them, and obviously that's why fans, and that's why they're so popular and consistently putting them out. But as someone who does a mock draft as part of their job, what are your thoughts on them? Do you like doing them, or do you not like doing them?
It's funny. I used to just hate it. I hated it because you're never going to be right. I mean, they grade these things every year before the draft, and if you get 7 or 8, 9 of the top of the 32 picks correct with a team and a player, like you're at the top of the list, it's darn near impossible. Yeah. So, and we're just, we're guessing like everybody else is guessing. And then I used to, when I didn't know better, I would, you get on social media and check your mentions, and dude, you get torched. Yes. And so I would be like, why do I have to do this? Like, this is killing my self-esteem, reading these comments. But then, you keep hearing over and over again from everybody. And as you well know, they traffic incredibly. I mean, there's just people eat these things up. Yeah. And so I got to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm not going to fight City Hall anymore. They want me to do them. I'll do them. I don't take offense to when people get upset. I've just kind of got to the point where, hey, if people are interested in the draft, it's what keeps me employed. So that's if the mock drafts can help drive interest, then I'm all for it, and we'll continue to do it. I always try and explain to people that I do my mock drafts based off my ears, and I do my top 50 list based off my eyes. So my opinion of a player is how I've rated them, and that's where I will, I'll defend my opinion because this is what I think of them as players. A mock draft, I mean, it's what I'm hearing. So sometimes the information's good, sometimes the information's bad. I don't take any offense to what people think about that. It's just a fun exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. The NFL draft coming up on the NFL Network Thursday, April 26th, and going throughout the weekend. That starts at 8 p.m. Eastern on the NFL Network. And we're joined by Daniel Jeremiah from NFL.com and the NFL Network here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. And let's pivot a little bit away from football and sort of your current job and go back a little bit. Growing up, your dad, a very well-known pastor, David Jeremiah. I wonder what life was like growing up for Daniel Jeremiah as a PK, as a pastor's kid. What was that like for you?
Well, I mean, I think as anybody that's a pastor's kid would tell you, you're definitely growing up in a fishbowl. I mean, everybody's kind of keeping an eye on you and paying attention to you. And not only was he a pastor, he was kind of the head of our entire school district. So I was on campus from kindergarten through 12th grade. It was on the campus of our church. That's where the school was. It was Christian high school, so it was right on the campus of Shadow Mountain Community Church. So, and my dad was kind of in charge of the whole deal. So you always had people keeping an eye on you. In some ways, it was there's many ways it was really cool because he had so many speaking engagements that he would do all over the country. And my dad loves sports. He played college basketball at Cedarville College, and he's big into sports, and all of us kids were into it as well. So he had opportunities to speak at NBA All-Star games. He was the chaplain for the San Diego Clippers that's how long ago that was.
Yeah.
So we were always around those things, and I remember he would do the chapels for a lot of the opposing teams that were playing the Chargers. I can remember being a kid, and he was doing the chapel for the Cowboys. And like you, I grew up a Cowboy fan, which don't tell anybody that I worked with in Philadelphia that I will never be invited back. but grew up a Cowboy fan, and I can remember as a kid him doing that chapel. And then after the chapel, we got to go eat in the team breakfast. And I can remember like it was yesterday. Me and my brother sitting there. My brother's 7 years older than I am. And at this time, I'm guessing I'm maybe 8 or 9 or so, and we see Tony Dorsett across the room, and we're both trying to encourage the other one to go up to him and just say hello. We weren't even getting an autograph. We just wanted to say hello to Tony Dorsett. He's our favorite player.
Yep.
Neither one of us could muster the courage to do it, but we had so many cool moments like that where we got to be around different players in cool sporting events because of what he was doing from a ministry standpoint. And then growing up on that campus, I actually think I never got in trouble. There was something about my dad there. If I would have done anything wrong, it would have looked bad on him. So
yeah.
you had look. I just never wanted to embarrass my dad ever.
Yeah.
And so that actually, if you're ever tempted as a youngster to do something stupid, it kind of kept me on the straight and narrow. Not because I knew it was right or wrong, or I shouldn't be doing this because my faith tells me I shouldn't be doing this. It was simply, man, I don't want to put my dad in a bad spot or embarrass him.
That's really interesting. I think that's a good lesson for a lot of the youngsters listening too. Is not just trying to do their own thing, but thinking of. I mean, you were thinking of consequences before you were even taking the step to try and do the thing that wasn't right,
Yeah, well, I mean, look, again, and I think there's, obviously I think as Christians you want to come at that from, hey, this is, you study the Word, and this is the right way to do things,
right.
And that's how you should. That's the best. But to me, it was even, it was just, hey, I would never want to see my dad have to go through having to deal with me being a knucklehead. So just kind of the way that I looked at it there. But then I had, so many. I was so blessed to just have such a good home to grow up in. There was just, it was a great experience.
Well, you were entrenched, obviously, in faith, from the time you were a kid and now, into your life today. But was there ever a time? Because I always wonder about this with PKs that you might have questioned your faith or slid back or just kind of lost whatever you thought you might have had growing up and then kind of realized it later. Was that ever a moment for you?
No, I mean, I think everybody's faith journey, there's moments where you're maybe more plugged in than others, I think that's totally normal. I never had a moment where I ever doubted my faith. I never had a moment where I, quote unquote, backslid into a different lifestyle or anything like that. I didn't have that, but there's definitely, for sure, there's moments where, in long stretches, to be quite honest, there's long stretches where you're like, is my prayer life where it needs to be? No.
Right.
Am I in the Word as much as I need to be? No. And you try and correct that, when you can. I think that sometimes it's I think people that aren't in the faith that they kind of look at it and say, this is, it's a perfect standard you're kind of kept to, and I don't know if I can do that. None of us can do that. And all of us have moments where we're not where we need to be in in all these different areas, but that's part of the journey. And you kind of make corrections as you go along, but it's not a perfect path, that's for sure.
Absolutely. We're talking to Daniel Jeremiah here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Was there ever a thought for you to go into ministry? Because I know you played quarterback in college. You were at Appalachian State. Obviously, you've been in the NFL, either working and scouting with teams or at the NFL Network. Basically, since then, I wonder, because your dad is who he is and obviously still going strong as a very well-known pastor, impacting a lot of people. Did you ever think about going into ministry?
Yeah, it's funny. My dad always told us as kids that, don't go into ministry unless you are 100% called into ministry. I don't want you to go into it because your dad did it or you feel obligated to. Said if you're called into to do it, then you do it. And so my brother has actually worked for my dad and kind of helped run his Turning Point ministry for 20 plus years. He's been working for my father. My sister, her husband's a pastor. And so she's involved with the ministry there with the church, and then my other sister and I were not. We didn't go into the ministry. Both working regular secular workforce. So it was never something that was kind of pushed. And my dad always talked about, hey, you can have an impact outside of the ministry, obviously. So I remember being at Appalachian State. We started a chance to start a Bible study there with our football team. Which is pretty crazy. That was something I talked about with our running backs coach at the time, and said, okay, let's go ahead and put a Bible study together. I didn't know if 2 guys would show up, Jason. I didn't know who was going to come.
Yeah.
We ended up having a pretty good turnout of 20 plus guys, 30 guys, something like that. Our head coach, even though it was a public school there at App State, Jerry Moore, was a strong believer, and so he was fired up that we decided to do a Bible study. So he would order pizza and have pizza for us there every Tuesday night wherever we were doing the Bible study. And so that helped actually bring in some more people. So he was supportive.
That's great.
And then the crazy thing is, and I don't know if it's where it is right now, but when I went there on a scouting visit, gosh, I guess this was, 2009, 2010. I graduated in 2000. Right. And the Bible study was still going strong. So that was kind of a cool thing that just you start and you don't have any idea what it's going to do, and then it's still going. So I've just I want to get more involved in doing some speaking. Hopefully, I'm going to do a men's breakfast here at the end of the month, and hopefully there's some more of that in my future here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting too, and you hear the motto in the church, work as worship, or, ministry is everywhere. We are. It's not just like working in ministry. So I probably should have corrected myself in asking you that about going into ministry, because in many ways, everything we do as believers is ministry. Do you find that for yourself as well?
No question. People are always watching. People are always paying attention. So yeah, you're gonna definitely do that. And we're called, it's something that I admired about you, from afar, is even just like the simple things you'll do of throwing some verses on social media. And you weren't, this is long before you made this change, and just they're working at ESPN. There's a, I don't know, I don't know the right word. I would say there's a sweet subtlety to it. You know what I mean? I've never found that the guys that are kind of beating you over the head are ultra aggressive. I just haven't seen examples of how that's been effective. Yeah. I've seen guys that have subtly gone about it and been available. Make yourself available to people. Hey, if anything going on, you need to talk to me. Hey, I'm here. Let me know. That type of faith example to me has been more powerful than somebody that's going around and trying to be really aggressive. That's just my opinion.
I completely agree with that for sure. When I speak, and I speak a lot about faith in the workplace, that's exactly what I tell people, is slamming, people's heads with the Bible and wearing shirts that have a cross on it isn't going to lead people to Jesus. Most often it's relationships and actually having conversations with people. And so I wonder for you, just in your job as a scout, and we'll talk about how you got into scouting in a minute, even at the NFL Network, is there a story or an example of times when just that relationship building has led to an opportunity for you to kind of share your faith and tell someone about like where you come from and what you believe?
It's interesting. I would say probably more so than that. It's been able to, through the process, even identify who some current believers are, and then through the years, develop and maintain a relationship and try and be an encouragement to those guys. Yeah. That's definitely something that's taken place. I mean, I getting to know Carson Wentz before the draft that year, and just like, dude, this guy's different now. I mean, this guy's on fire. So being able to text him or send him direct messages and just have kind of keep that relationship afloat and encourage him. Guys like that. I mean, Zach Ertz is another one. That Philadelphia Eagles team, as you know, is littered with really, really strong believers.
Yes, it is.
So there's been opportunities definitely for that. I mean, like Brandon Cooks, just that trade that just went down yesterday. Yep. Send him a note, dude. I know he's a West Coast guy. He works out here. man, I'm so happy for you. God is great, isn't he? And then, he gets you back, and we just kind of have a nice little back and forth there. So it's kind of developing those relationships has been really, really a cool part of this deal.
Now, how did you get into NFL scouting? Like, how does that even become something when you ended up you were with the Ravens and the Browns and the Eagles? How does that become a thing?
All right, this is a little bit of a longer story here. If you've got time for the long
It's a
version, I'll give it.
podcast. You know
I'll
how
give
we
it to
are.
you. Yeah, no commercial breaks.
That's right.
This is kind of a great example of God's timing here, and I'll go all the way back to when I was in high school. I wanted to go into broadcasting. That's what I wanted to do. This is the job that I have now would have been my dream job. Growing up, this is exactly what I'd want to do. I had no idea how to get there or what to do. So it all kind of started. This is 1997. I'm in college in just finishing up my freshman year, I guess this would be, and at Northeast Louisiana University, which is now Louisiana Monroe. I'm home for the Christmas break, I believe it was, and then the Super Bowl was there that year, which was the Packers and the Broncos. It was the John Elway game where they beat the Packers.
Sure.
And so my dad, having a large church in San Diego, was somebody that people in the media had listened to, or believers around the country. He's all over the place on radio and television. Well, Chris Mortensen, as you well know, at ESPN, he had listened to my dad every day on the radio, and so he's in town for the Super Bowl and decides he wants to go to my dad's church. Never met him, they've never talked, no relationship, nothing. So he goes to the service. After the service is over, he goes up and introduces himself to my father. So my dad, being a sports nut, knew who Mort was and invited him up to lunch. So I get home. I drive home from church. I don't know any of this has happened. I pull in and come into the house for Sunday lunch, and Chris Mortensen's sitting at the table. And I'm like, what in the world? So we struck up a conversation with him and kind of told him I was interested in broadcasting. And he goes, well, I'll tell you what, we've got the media day, Super Bowl media day. Why don't you come with me and you can shadow me around? This is awesome. So I go shadow him around for the day. It's a dream. And then he goes, hey, I got to go do a one-on-one with Reggie White. You want to just follow me over to their team hotel? Come on over. So I go over and watch the Reggie White. This is unbelievable. So we end up striking up a really good friendship that still exists today. And without Mort, there's no way I would be where I am. It was just a total God thing putting us together. And so then we go from there. He knows my interest in the draft, so he has me come up and answer his phones while I'm still in college. I would go up to the draft for ESPN and just sit off to the side of the stage for a couple years and answer his phones. They have the producer of the draft is Jay Rothman, who you know well.
Of course.
Jay is doing college football, producing college football at the time. So I get word. I don't remember if it was from Jay directly or if it was from Chris that says Jay's doing the national championship game down in Florida. If you want to come be an intern, you can come be an intern. You can at least put it on your resume, but we can't pay you anything. We can't pay for your flight. We can't pay for your lodging. So you just got to figure it out. So I fly down there. I stay with a college teammate, and I just run and grab sandwiches for people all week, down there for the Orange Bowl. And so then this is kind of as I'm finishing up college. Actually, it was right as I'm finishing up college. So then I graduate in December, and I'm like, man, I want to do this broadcasting thing, but I don't know I don't even know what I'm doing. How's this going to work out? So I go to work for my dad. You talk about going into ministry. That's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
Right out of college. So I'm working for him, and then out of the blue over that summer, I get a call from Jay Rothman saying, hey, I've just taken over Sunday Night Football, the NFL, and I want you to be on the crew as a production assistant. And I'm like, wait, I get to go to every Sunday night game? Yeah, I'm in. This is great. So I go do that. So I'm doing that for 2 years. And then halfway in a game in the second season, I'm in the press box of the Baltimore Ravens for a Ravens game. My brother's college roommate runs into me. He played with him at Liberty University. And he goes, hadn't seen him in forever. How you doing? Good. Would you ever be interested in scouting? And I'm like, no, I've never even know anything about it. No, I never even thought about it. He goes, well, I think you'd enjoy it. Why don't you give it some thought? So I ended up calling back, saying, yeah, no, I'd be interested in it. So long story short, I interview there with the Ravens. I'm sitting here going, I wanted to do TV, but I'm kind of behind the scenes, and that's not really what my goal was, or my ambition was, to be on the producing side of things. So I end up taking the job with the Ravens, and I'm there for 4 years. Then one of our guys that brought me in there, Phil Savage, gets the GM job with the Browns. So I ultimately end up going over to Cleveland with him to take a nice promotion over there. And then first year we go 10-6. The next year we go 4-12. We all get fired. And here I'm sitting here thinking, like, what, like, kind of questioning, okay, why did I, God, I knew it was we prayed about it, and I knew it was the right move for me to leave Baltimore coming off of a 13-3 team and go to Cleveland. And then here it is 2 years later, and now you're out of work. And then again, Mort kind of re-enters and says, hey, why don't you start a Twitter page? And I'm like, a Twitter? I don't even know what it is. So
I remember this part.
Yes. So then he tells me to start a Twitter page. I had 18 months left on my contract with the Browns. So the Browns love to pay people to not work for them. I was one of them.
Right. Yeah.
So I had offered a job from another team. I turned it down because it wasn't gonna pay me anymore. So during that 18 months, Mort says start a Twitter page. I'm on a cruise ship in Alaska, and I go to the internet cafe to open up my email, and I have 4,000 emails. And I go, what the heck? Well, it was like when you sign up for Twitter, and if you get a new follower, they send you an email.
Yes.
So I had all these followers, and then I'm combing through. I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then I find an email from Mort, and it says, hey, you might want to tweet. I've just told all my followers to follow you for takes on players. And I'm like, okay. So that kind of started the social media thing, and then that quickly took off. I started getting some radio requests to do radio interviews, and then you guys called me to have me start doing some appearances on TV. So that's kind of the first half of the journey right there.
Yeah, I love that story because that's when you and I kind of connected. I think it might have been Mort that actually called me and was like, you need to think about this guy Daniel. And I brought you in. I remember having dinner with you. We had you on ESPN's First Take, kind of as their official.
That was the Tebow year. That was the Tim Tebow year with Skip.
Yes,
that was my first introduction to TV.
Yeah, welcome. It's like baptism by fire, right?
No clue what I was doing, but I was like, this is awesome. I'm having so much fun.
Well, the good thing about what you did then was you sought out feedback too. I remember with myself and all the other people that worked on the show, you sought out feedback, like, how can I get better? Am I doing what you want me to do here? And I just wonder for you, because that obviously has turned around. You went back to the Eagles, but then turned around into a career in broadcasting with NFL Network. Was that something that you learned to just kind of get better? Because you can know everything you want to know, but then you actually have to deliver it on TV.
Yeah, no, it's content and then it's delivery. But that the story kind of gets weirder, because that was so we start doing all that media stuff, and then I got pretty far down the road with ESPN to sign a contract there. And I remember thinking, Jason, just like, okay, man, God is amazing. Like I've always wanted to do the TV thing. I never even thought about the scouting thing, but scouting was the perfect, path to get me to TV. Like this worked out perfectly. I never could have envisioned something like this. Total God thing. Yeah. So God's going to land me. I'm going to get this job with ESPN, and this is, we're set. This is awesome. This is exactly what I wanted to go and do with my life professionally, and it's all happening. Well, then the lockout happened. So ESPN is a hiring freeze. We have to wait. It's going to take a while. Well, now my contract's running out with the Browns. I'm married. I've got 4 kids, and my money's getting ready to dry up. Yeah. And so you're kind of sitting here going like, okay, we'll trust God. What are we supposed to do here? So then the Eagles offered me a scouting job, and I'm like, you know what? The travel with scouting was hard, especially on a family, and so I wasn't crazy about that. But this is what God has. So I go in with the Eagles, and I'm there for 2 years. Halfway through my second year, my broadcasting agent, I hadn't talked to in forever. He calls me and says, "Hey, I've got opportunities for you at ESPN. There's an opportunity, and at NFL Network, there's an opportunity. Would you be interested?" And I was like, "Absolutely, yes, no, for sure." So it kind of came down to it. I ended up finishing, I told the Eagles I'd get through that year, so I got through the year, and right after the year was over, I took the job with NFL Network. But talk about God's timing. I was going to uproot a family that had all of our family on the West Coast, and take my wife away from her parents and her mom and all her siblings, and our kids are just rocking at their Christian school. They're doing great and thriving. And I was going to uproot everybody and go all across the country to ESPN. And then here I just had to wait, 2 years, which went by in the blink of an eye. And the thing with NFL Network appears, and now we stay right where we are. We don't move, and I just have a 85, 90-mile drive to work. So it was a total God thing and timing, and it's one of those moments where you kind of, when you get to it, you go, okay, I'll never doubt this again. Like whatever plans you think you have for yourself, just have faith that God's got a much better plan.
How difficult is it, though, as a believer to be patient and to just trust? How difficult is that?
I think the longer you go through life and the more and I talk about, when we're talking about scouting, going back through and self-evaluating, I think when you go through life and you look back at these different moments and you say, okay, God was there, God delivered, God was there, God delivered. And it's like, okay, that just strengthens your faith. Yeah. It's not going to be smooth. There's going to be rough moments, but hey, there's a plan, there's a purpose, and your faith grows through each and every experience. I didn't even mention the part of the story where my senior year in college, after having shared the quarterback position for 3 years, I kind of established myself as the firm starter. I was in the best shape I'd ever been in. As a captain, voted captain of the team. We play Wake Forest in the opener. I think it was early in the third quarter. I tear my knee, and I remember that was one of the moments thinking, "What in the world? Like, this is all kind of my plan. We're gonna have this great year," and then it kind of put a huge dent in my whole senior season. Well, when I was in the training room getting therapy was when my brother's roommate, who I talked about, who got me the job at the Ravens, happened to be going through the training room, and that's where he saw me. And I wouldn't even have recognized him if I saw him in the press box 2 years later. But because I was hurt and getting rehab in the training room, he came through to talk to the trainer about one of our NFL guys. And then we caught up with each other there. So I go back and say, me getting hurt was one of the best things that ever happened to me. So it's just when you go through life and you're like, man, this is not something that's happened once. This is dozens of times where God's been faithful, and your faith grows.
What's a Bible verse that you cling to, Daniel? One that maybe it's been in your heart for a long time. Maybe it's one that you're kind of meditating on more recently. But what's a Bible verse that you cling to now in your journey?
Well, I've always, like you talk about, different people have life verses and things like that. I had a plaque that actually my dad had given me when I was in college, and it was a verse that everybody, most people know and are familiar with. It was just Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the thoughts I think toward you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace, not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. And the context there, obviously, the promise made to His people that they would return to the land, and I just think, there's the best thing about this faith journey is that we have hope. That we absolutely have hope. And that's something that I think people should be able to see in us, hopefully without even having to say anything. That we have, that I guess they say there's a happy ending to our story.
Yeah.
So let's act like it.
Who is Christ to you? Like when I say the name Jesus, what is that? What comes to mind for you?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is He's Savior and Lord. This is someone who gave up everything so I can have everything. I don't know. I saw an image the other day that was just coming across, because you go through Easter. And I know it was the movie, but it was just the image of the Passion of Christ. And you just see Him and look at the pain and the suffering that He went through. And He did it for you. He did it for me. He did it for everybody. Yeah. He lived the ultimate selfless life. And you think about all the selfish moments that we have every single day. And just to think about that, it's just did everything for everyone else. So that's who Jesus is to me.
With your job right now, you're entrenched in NFL draft prep, the draft coming up in a couple of weeks. What from the Lord are you learning right now? This will be our last question, is what is God teaching you maybe in the season of life that you're in? It could be through work. It could be through just being a dad and a husband and all that. But what are you learning from the Lord right now?
I'm learning the Lord has a sense of humor. Because I've been going through Proverbs, and I was reading this morning, and we talked about the schedule, that we keep. Like right now, we have Path to the Drafts 5 days a week. We've got a podcast now that goes 3 days a week. You do hits on these other shows. You're doing different radio interviews. You're doing writing, just updated a top 50 list. And so you start thinking, okay, gosh, this is a lot of work. And then this morning, where I am in Proverbs, I'll even pull it up for you here.
Yeah.
It was in Proverbs 6. How long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands asleep. So shall your poverty come on you like a prowler. And I'm sitting here going like, okay, don't be lazy. Okay, that's biblical. So don't complain about doing a little work.
That's a good lesson. I think we all need to hear that, man. That's absolutely true. This has been great. Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network, NFL.com. He does a podcast. He's online, TV, radio, everywhere. I call you a multimedia personality. How's that? Is that accurate?
No, I would. Personality might be a little strong. I don't know if I'm bringing you that. I think multimedia, okay, but maybe not the personality.
Not personality. Well, that's all right.
How about person?
Multimedia person. There you go.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, listen, we'll see you on the NFL draft. Obviously, the network and NFL.com Thursday night, April 26th for the coverage. Are you going to get to go to Jerry World, or do you have to stay in the studio in LA?
No, I'll be out there. That's one of the cool things. Like that was always a dream of mine, just to be involved with draft coverage.
Yeah.
So this will be I've been here for 5 years now. This will be my second year getting to sit at the big kids table. So it'll be a lot of fun.
It's nice, right?
Yeah, you do all the work and study these guys, but it's fun when you get the juices of the live draft and you get to sit there and talk about these guys, and inevitably something's going to happen that's going to shock us all, and that's what makes it fun.
That's what makes it amazing. Absolutely. Listen, Daniel Jeremiah, thanks so much for joining us here on the podcast. We'll be watching for the draft on the 26th and wish you nothing but the best. Thanks, man.
Thanks, buddy.
And we do thank Daniel Jeremiah from the NFL Network and NFL.com for joining us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Once again, you can watch the NFL draft and all its coverage Thursday, April 26th at 8 p.m. Eastern on the NFL Network. And if you love the NFL, man, that draft is just awesome. It's such great drama, knowing and trying to figure out where your team's going to go and who they're going to take, and being a Monday morning quarterback and critiquing it right away when they've never even played it down for your team. It's just so much fun as a fan of football and as a fan of the NFL. So we'll be watching Thursday night, April 26th on the NFL Network for the NFL's 2018 draft coverage. And Daniel Jeremiah will be a big part of that, and we appreciate him being here on the podcast. As always, we appreciate you as well. You can reach us on Twitter at sports_spectrum. You can email me, jason@sportspectrum.com. And you can also leave a review. If you go to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and click on that review button and leave a review, let us know what you think of the podcast, and let us know of any guests you might have or any ideas that you might have for Sports Spectrum. We would love to hear from you. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time right here on the Sports Spectrum podcast.